Hello, the Witch Blair here for Drag Queen Story Time with some of my favourites from the Brothers Grimm. Love these, was brought up on them. My grandmother was Irish, so I grew up on really old folk tales from Ireland, and then that sort of spun on into me wanting to read every sort of old folk and fairy tale. I loved them as a kid, I still read them now. This book has been read so many times, so I thought I'd share them with you all. And this time I thought I would read one that we all know, but maybe not this version, Rapunzel. There were once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to an enchantress who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it and had the greatest desire to eat some. This desire increased every day, and she knew that she could not get any of it. She quite pined away and looked pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't get some of the rampion Rapunzel which is in the garden behind our house to eat, I may die." The man who loved her thought, "Sooner than let my wife die, I will bring her some of the rampion Rapunzel, whatever it costs me." In the twilight of the evening he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion Rapunzel and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it and ate it with much relish. She, however, liked it so much, so very much, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If he was to have any rest, her husband once more descended into the garden. In the gloom of evening, therefore, he let himself down again. But when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How dare you," she said with an angry look, "descend into my garden and steal my rampion Rapunzel like a thief? You will suffer for it." "Ah," he replied, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died had she not gotten some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened and said to him, "If the case be as you say, I will allow you to take away as much with thee as you will. Only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I shall care for it like a mother." The man, in his terror, consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once and gave the child the name of Rapunzel and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew to be the most beautiful child beneath the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her in a tower which lay in a forest and had neither stairs nor a door. But quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down thy hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long fine hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then her hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and went by the tower. Then he heard a song which was so charming that he stood and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her, and looked for the door to the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out to the forest and listened to it. Once, when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw the enchantress come there, and heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down thy hair to me." Then Rapunzel laid down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I will go for once to try my fortune," said he. And the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man such as her eyes had never yet beheld came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if he would take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, "He will love me more than old Dame Gothel does." And so she said yes, and he laid her hand in his and said, "I will willingly go away with thee, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with thee a skein of silk every time that you come, and I will weave a ladder with it, and when that is ready, I will descend, and you will take me on your horse. They agreed that until the time should come he would come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this until one day Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how happens it that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son? He is with me in a moment." "Ah, you wicked child," cried the enchantress. "What do I hear thee say? I thought I had separated thee from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her anger she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful hair, wrapped it twice around her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snip, she cut it off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in grief and misery. On the same day, however, that she cast out Rapunzel, the enchantress in the evening had fastened the braids of her hair, which she had cut off, to the hook on the window. And when the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me," she let the hair down, and the king's son ascended, but he did not find his dearest Rapunzel above, but old Dame Gothel, the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly, "thou wouldst fetch thy dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you, and you will never see her more." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes, and he wandered quite blind about the forest, eating nothing but roots and berries, and did nothing but to lament and weep for the loss of his dearest wife. He roamed about in misery for 2 years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl, lived in wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed familiar to him. He went towards it, and when he approached, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. 2 of her tears landed on his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived with their children for a long time afterwards, happy and contented. That was Rapunzel. I will probably be back at some other point with more drag queen stories, but until then, have a very good time, and I heartily recommend reading lots of Brothers Grimm. They're lovely stories. Bye.